Watching my first video with regard to the tax principles would lead you to a more easier way of understanding about this tax definition. However, in this video, I would like to repeat or add some points about understanding on the tax definition in accordance with those definitions given by our law literature and other sources like the jurisprudence. Okay, so taxation is defined as it is a process by which the sovereign independent state through its law-making body imposes burdens upon subjects and objects within its jurisdiction for the purpose of raising revenue to carry out the legitimate objectives of the government. So those phrases that I have highlighted are key phrases that would lead you to understand, and it needs to be understood in order that you can really understand fully about the taxation definition. So first, it is a process and means. It means to say that there is a levying process that is happening in the exercise of this taxation. So process that is to be acted by the law-making body. So strictly speaking, the exercise of the taxation, it's only by means of law-making body, which is we have the Congress and the Senate. Okay, so the exercise of that is an exercise of the sovereignty of the state. So to recall, we have elements of the state, right? So to form a state, we should have people, the government, territory, and the sovereign powers. So these four are the elements to complete what we call state, because lack of one of these elements would not render or result to what we call an independent state. Okay, then in the levying, what is exercised in there is the imposition of burdens. So they, under that stage, so remember, try to recall in the phases of taxation we have first the levying, then second we have the assessment, and last is we have the collection. The exercise of the tax is actually happening only in this stage. This is the exercise of tax. This one are only administration. It is very important to segregate the two in order that for us to understand more why is it that some of the aspect of this taxation can be delegated. In here, levying, the delegation is very strict unless that is allowed by the Constitution. But in here in the levying, only the lawmaking body can exercise that, and nothing more, nothing less. And exceptions are provided in the Constitution, like the exaction of the tariff that is provided or given or delegated to the President of the Philippines, but there is a limitation as to the range, what's the lowest range and the highest range that the President can make exaction. Okay, so there's a limitation for that. And second is the delegation to the LGU. So again, I would like to repeat. So first is to the President, and second is to the LGU. So the LGU can raise its own tax or can impose taxes on its constituents, but the exercise also is to be done by its lawmaking body or the council of that LGU. Okay, so that's the levying and the delegation. So again, in here, what is imposed under the levying, what is determined in there are the rates, what's the tax type, the subjects, the objects that will be covered, and the time to be filed, okay, and the objective of the tax law that is formulated under the levying. So in here, again in the levying, what is made in here is the tax law, which is under the lawmaking body, the legislature. Okay, so the imposition of the tax law, it would be only within the bounds of the jurisdiction of the state. So we cannot impose taxes beyond that. So there are other points that should be remembered in here, like taxes cannot be imposed beyond the territory. So we cannot impose it on the foreign government. Now there are some arrangement in line with the principle of international committee, that in the international committee you have to respect the foreign government, no matter how small or weak is the state of that or the foreign state. Okay, so as a consequence of that, if they have some properties here in the Philippines, which is acting for in line with their governmental functions, those particular properties cannot be covered with our taxation. But if ever that they have some businesses that are putted in here or placed in here in the Philippines, not for the government exercise but for commercial exercise, that's a different scenario, which would subject which would make them not immune when it comes to the taxation. Okay, so that's what the law says about this jurisdiction. So for the purpose of raising revenue, okay, taxes, we have primary, and the primary of that, there is no other purpose is to raise revenue. That's only the primary purpose. And the secondary or incidental, they call that incidental to the primary, is there's some regulatory protection with the economy. We have sanctuary, like the redistribution of wealth, etc. You can, I think you see that on my previous video, and you can discuss that later on. Okay, that this secondary is incidental. This is not the purpose but incidental. So when, for example, they want to raise taxes out of the tobacco, so they put sin taxes of that, but the other goal of having that taxes is for regulatory purpose, but that is not the primary, that is only secondary. So therefore, again, that is an act of police power, but still that imposition of the tax doon sa mga tobacco ay makwalify pa rin siya under the definition of the taxation. Why? It is because, again, its primary is to raise revenue, and incidental only yung nagiging regulated na yung consumption ng tobacco. So that's it. And the ultimate objectives is, again, this is for the tax, but the next question is, where are we going to use that revenues that were raised through taxation? That is to carry out legitimate objectives. In short, that is for public purpose. Public purpose has been used as a qualifying ground in order to declare the tax law as valid or not. So the due process can also use the public purpose as its criteria when it comes to the substantive due process of law. And also we can see that in our inherent powers, one of those, or the number one inherent limitation of the inherent powers, is the public purpose, which is the limitation of the taxation as an inherent or one of the inherent powers. So maraming gamit yan. So that's the complete explanation of the taxation. So if you follow my discussion, I hope that you have understand it very well about the tax definition. Now, the other are there's another way of explaining that, like it is an inherent power, sovereign state, which is also these points are also included in our first definition. Exercise through its lawmaking body to raise revenue, and the primary purpose is of this revenue is to defray necessary expenses. So again, public purpose. When we say necessary expenses, we're talking always about the public purpose. Okay, so reviewing the definition, we can see these are the key components like inherent power, legislative act, revenue generation, and public purpose. But we can see more about the key components of when it comes to the definition of the tax. Okay, there's another definition of the tax which is more likely the same with the definition of taxation power. What's defined in the tax is this one, the burden. This is the tax. When you see the burden, and it has its own definition. But again, the nature of the definition is more like with the taxation definition. Okay, to add more about the definition, in a simple term, it is an act of levying. But again, the points are only repeated here. Apportion the cost of government. Apportion, this suggests a proportional way of imposing tax. Proportional, that is allowed, but the Constitution is suggesting or mandating progressive. These two are two different in each other. Progressive suggesting that the higher the income, the higher the tax rate. While proportional is proportion, meaning to say is in ratio, an exact ratio to income or to tax base. However, these two are already reconciled. So according to latest jurisprudence is that the interpretation of the mandate by the Constitution when it comes to the evolvement of progressive tax system is only suggesting as encouragement. So it's not mandated because proportional is not in an invalid way of imposing tax. So therefore, it is acceptable. So both are acceptable. So that's why they interpreted that way. Okay, to continue, among those who have in some measures are privileged to enjoy benefits, okay, must therefore bear its burdens. Okay. So lahat yun magiging subject starting from the person himself, the right subject to tax, and also the property. So these are the three identified items that are subject to tax. So those three are too many actually. If we're going to make it in detail, we had a lot of taxes or a lot of subjects and objects that are covered with this taxation power. It is a power inherent in every sovereign state, being essential to the existence, essential to the existence of every government. So dito pumapasok yung tinatawag natin na necessity theory or yung lifeblood theory. The government cannot function cannot exercise its function without the money that is raised by the tax. So that's why tax became necessity and a lifeblood of the government. Even not mentioned in the Constitution, the state can still exercise. So take note, the Constitution only sets limits, not providing the taxation power. Therefore, any constitutional provision regarding the state's power to tax should not be interpreted as grant of power. So again, Constitution is not granting power, but only sets limitation. Okay. So, but merely a limitation of the state. In addition to that, taxes, this is the definition of the taxes: enforced contribution, proportional contributions, or charges from the person's property levied by the lawmaking body. So you see that on the definition, it's more likely with the taxation power, only that we are not defining about the burden or the imposition, not the power. Okay. So again, those characteristics are in the definitions that we can find in the tax definition. I mean, those ingredients or elements that we can find in there is also can be found in the taxes. So the lawmaking body, by virtue of sovereignty, to support government, all public needs. Here is the last one about, this is, of course, this is coming from the American jurisprudence, and also our laws actually are coming from there because they have already a matured system of the democratic government. So those decisions, most of them are used in here in our country because we are lack of experience as to that. So according to this, power is inherent in sovereignty. Okay, that's how they call it one. So inherent. So you see that in here in the elements, the composition of the state is people, government, territory, sovereign, and one of the sovereign powers is taxation. So taxation is isa siya sa mga inherent doon sa existence of the state. And here, because it is necessary attribute of the sovereignty. So without this power, no sovereign state can exist or endure. Or the tax proceeds upon the theory that exists in the government is a necessity. So ito yung sa necessity theory. And this power is essential, inherent, attribute of sovereignty, belonging as a matter of right to every independent state, as a matter of right. Okay, meaning to say, it's really, really essential. The state cannot stand, or the government cannot stand without the power of the taxation. No sovereign state can continue to exist. See this? So this is demonstrating about the lifeblood. The government cannot exist without the taxes, without the means to pay its expenses. That for those means, it has the right to compel. So that's why taxes becomes enforceable. It is not voluntary. Again, not voluntary. Okay. So, and properly within its limits to contribute, hence the emergence of the power to tax. Okay. So that's it. The American jurisprudence, taxation number 40. Okay. So here in our Supreme Court, we have also this another description about the taxation, that it is said that taxes are what we pay for civilized society. Okay, without it, they would be paralyzed for lack of motive power. So it suggests again the lifeblood, the necessity. Dalawa itong. Hence, despite the natural reluctance to surrender one's hard-earned income to the taxing authorities, every person who is liable must continue contribute his share in the running, must enforced. Okay. Share the running the government. The government, for its part, is expected to respond. So dito yung pumapasok yung tinatawag natin na symbiotic relationship. That in exchange to the contribution of taxes, the government has to provide public services, okay, to enhance moral and material values. So this symbiotic relationship is the rationale of taxation. Should dispel the erroneous notion that it is an arbitrary method. Yeah, because there are a lot of complaints that it is arbitrary. Why is it that there's no due process of law, that they need to take some of your money to contribute to the state? So this is they try to reduce that erroneous notion. Okay, yung wrong impression with regard to the taxation. So therefore, in here, that it is an arbitrary. So taxation is a symbiotic, whereby exchange for protection that the citizens get from the government, taxes paid. So yun yung protection rule. This particular rule actually can explain a lot of things regarding with the rationality of having this taxation beyond the territory and taxation of having intangible benefits. Intangible benefits, some of those are in the form of laws. Okay, we don't see them, but if we have no laws, those laws are enforced by the government and needs money in order to maintain that. Kung walang batas, there will be chaos in the society because no one will follow the rules if no one will enforce it. So therefore, we have this government that needs our taxes. So that's all for the explanation about the taxation of government. So we took already 20 minutes of that. Thank you so much.